The film follows a skilled crew of thieves led by Charlie, as they try to steal a large amount of gold bars from a safe to take revenge on a former ally, who betrayed them and left them for dead in the icy waters of Italy. John has just gotten out of prison and contacts his daughter, telling her he wants to send her a gift, but she is wary and asks whether he has a receipt since she knows his history of theft. Their conversation is cut short, and John joins Charlie and 4 other members of the crew, whose target is a safe holding $35 million in gold bars beneath a house built over the water. The crew plants bombs under the safe to drop it into the water and successfully cracks it open underwater. After a tense speedboat chase with police and security, they escape with the gold. After the successful heist, the whole crew gathers on a snow-covered mountain, where John raises a toast to Charlie for planning the operation perfectly. They discuss how to spend their share of the loot and laugh together before setting off. However, their journey is interrupted when Steve's men ram them from behind while crossing a bridge. Steve points a gun at Rob and orders him to take his hands off the wheel. As Steve's men begin unloading the gold from the bus, Steve aims his gun at John. John reminds him that they will find him, and Steve agrees before immediately shooting him. Rob quickly tries to drive away, but the bus plunges off the bridge into the freezing river. Steve keeps firing to make sure they are dead. Luckily, they escape to the riverbank, where Charlie mourns the death of his mentor, while Stella has been doing safecracking work for the police and just finished a job, earning praise for her skill. When she returns to her office, she meets Charlie, who tells her he has tracked down Steve and wants to recover the stolen gold. However, Stella turns down his offer, insisting she is not a thief like her father. Even so, that night she changes her mind and contacts Charlie, saying she wants to see Steve's face when they take back the gold. And she agrees to join. In the morning, Charlie introduces the crew to Stella and then reveals new identities for the members. Next, the crew strategizes the heist, starting by watching Steve's estate and devising a plan to control the traffic. Finally, they decide to take the first step and plan to get into Steve's house with Stella as the spy, since she is the only one Steve will not recognize. Meanwhile, Steve is still trying to sell the gold bars to a money launderer. And during the meeting, Yevon buys 2 gold bars and assures Steve he will take more in the future. Elsewhere, the crew watches Steve closely as they refine their strategy. They decide to enter his mansion disguised as repair workers, with Rob and Lyle obtaining a work van and uniforms from a repair company. Rob decides to seduce one of the female repair workers to get her uniform and van. After using some of his best pickup lines, he convinces her to spend the night with him, and the next morning he quietly steals her uniform and copies her van key. They quickly give the uniform and key to Stella so she can pose as a female cable installer. In the meantime, Left Ear tampers with Steve's cable so that Steve has to call the repair shop for help. But the crew has hacked into his cell phone and answers the call directly. With a hidden camera on her chest, Stella drives the van to Steve's place, where his vicious dogs block her. Steve finally comes out to introduce himself, and as they enter the house he brags about his wealth and the size of his television. Using the camera, they capture the blueprint of the house while Stella searches for the location of the safe. Steve also tries to flirt with Stella and asks her on a date, which she refuses at first but later accepts after being persuaded. After the encounter with Steve, Stella feels uneasy and shaken at seeing the man who killed her father. So Charlie meets her to reassure her, and the crew returns to planning the heist. They test the small cars they plan to use to move the gold, using metal weights to simulate the expected weight. Stella is asked to take one for a test drive, but they soon discover it cannot carry as much gold as they need. Rob suggests bringing in a mechanic he knows to modify the cars, and Wrench agrees to do it for $10,000. Meanwhile, Lyle has hacked into the traffic system and excitedly shows off his work to Charlie, causing chaos in the streets by changing the traffic lights at will. Charlie is very impressed with Lyle's skill while Left Ear keeps sharpening his expertise with explosives. When Wrench finishes modifying the cars, they take them out for a test run and love the improvements. After that, Steve visits Yevon to trade more gold bars for cash, and during the talk, Yevon mentions the gold robbery, which sparks Steve's curiosity. Steve grows angry and demands to know who Yevon has told about the gold. When Yevon insists he has told no one, Steve throws him onto the table and shoots him dead in a rage. A few minutes later, Yevon's cousin Mashkov, the leader of a mafia gang, walks in and finds him dead. Meanwhile, Charlie takes Left Ear to buy explosives from Skinny, an arms dealer. On the way, Charlie warns Left Ear not to stare at him, but when they get close, Left Ear becomes nervous and speechless as he realizes that Skinny is not actually Skinny at all. Skinny still brings up the gold bars, but Charlie tells him they are not there to discuss that. On the other side, the Mafia has begun hunting for Yevon's killer. They bring in one of Yevon's employees and interrogate him for information about the murderer. The employee reveals that a large man with tattoos and long black hair had been asking about the gold bars. The Mafia boss quickly orders his men to find Skinny, and when they arrive, the boss questions Skinny about what he knows of the gold and his connection to Yevon's death. At the same time, Charlie and the crew are getting ready to carry out their plan. Lyle watches Steve's movements, and Steve finally drives off to his date with Stella. When they arrive, Charlie realizes that Steve's neighbors are throwing a party and that they will not be able to use explosives. So they have to call off the plan, leaving Stella no choice but to meet Steve for their date. At the restaurant, Steve praises Stella's work and says she is too beautiful for that job. As they keep talking, Steve invites Stella back to his place, but she declines and tells him to take it slow. Steve then questions her trust in him, and she replies that she trusts everyone and only distrusts the devil inside them. This is a line her father always used, and Steve is very familiar with it. He tells her that he knew someone who once said the same thing to him. And Steve grabs Stella's hand. Suddenly the crew walks into the restaurant, stunning Steve, who mocks Stella about her father's death as she tries to lunge at him, only for Rob to hold her back. Steve, now aware that he is in danger, brags about his security system and says the crew will struggle to break his safe. Charlie leans across the table and punches him right in the face. Later, at the crew's hideout, Charlie comforts Stella about the fight and the emotions Steve's presence stirred in her. Meanwhile, Lyle brings news that Steve plans to ship the gold to Mexico. Although the crew is disappointed, Charlie sees this as an opportunity. He believes they can cut off the safe before it leaves. And Lyle also tells them that Steve plans to move the gold by armored safe truck and helicopter. At this point, Charlie gets a call from Skinny pressing him about his involvement in Yevon's murder. Charlie denies knowing anything about the killing but asks him for a favor. Charlie and Rob go to a truck dealership to buy a vehicle for their heist. And while checking out the new truck, Charlie calls Wrench and asks for his help once more. Wrench expresses a wish to take part, and Charlie agrees to let him join. After that, Charlie and Left Ear plant explosives under the bridge where they plan to divert the gold truck. The crew moves into position to watch how Steve plans to transport the gold. They notice he has prepared 3 different safe trucks, most likely as a decoy. However, Charlie has anticipated this and suggests they focus on the one escorted by the helicopter. To confirm their suspicion, Lyle is told to check the tires of the 3 trucks and determine which one is carrying a heavy load. After assessing them, Lyle identifies truck number 128 as the one carrying the gold. At an intersection, the 3 trucks turn in different directions while Lyle tracks them through traffic cameras. He also causes a traffic jam on the route that truck 128 is expected to take. Meanwhile, Steve is watching the situation from the helicopter and realizes what is happening. He orders his pilot to turn back, but Lyle finally uses the traffic lights to steer truck 128 onto the desired road. The crew successfully follows the truck and begins a high-speed chase through a crowded street, down a flight of stairs, and even through a train station to reach the underpass in time. Lyle has to hit the button to stop a train so the crew can get through. At last, they reach the underpass and wait for Wrench's signal. The moment they get it, Left Ear sets off the blast, collapsing the road so the truck drops straight into the hole. Wrench acts in a flash and covers the mouth of the hole with the push of a button. And Steve responds by ordering his men to find the truck. Meanwhile, the crew runs into a new obstacle after reaching it. They realize the safe inside is not the model they expected, which surprises Stella. Charlie asks whether she can open it and she says it is a new model and extremely hard to break. Stella starts drilling into the safe but quickly finds it too hard to continue. She decides to rely on her skills and works carefully to open it. In the end, she succeeds and the crew cheers as they move the gold into the small cars. Lyle is thrilled as well, and with the gold moved successfully, the crew quickly pulls out. At the same time, Steve's men are in pursuit, following the crew down a tunnel. The chase grows tense and Steve's men start firing, but eventually the crew shakes them off and reaches the highway. However, Steve easily spots them from the helicopter and keeps chasing, following them across an open field and back onto the road. At this point, Charlie decides to take a different route, but Steve stays right on him. After a while, Steve and Charlie come face to face, and Charlie barely escapes the helicopter's blades. Steve climbs out of the helicopter and steals a stranger's car to keep chasing Charlie. Charlie reunites with the crew, and they quickly drive the small cars onto a train car before leaving. Meanwhile, Steve follows them relentlessly. He sees the crew leave the train car and approaches Wrench, mistaking him for a worker, then hands him $5,000 for access to the small cars. Steve pays Wrench half the money up front and promises to pay the rest later. Wrench takes the money and opens the train car, but Steve is stunned to see Charlie inside. Charlie praises Steve's tactics but tells him that he now has the gold while Steve has nothing. Steve draws his gun to shoot Charlie, but it is too late, because the Ukrainian mafia has just arrived at the scene. Steve does not know these men, so he asks who they are, and the mafia leader introduces himself as Yevon's cousin. Steve knows he is in trouble and immediately denies any link to Yevon's death, insisting that Yevon was already dead when he saw him. He tries to bargain with the mafia boss, but Charlie has already made a deal with him. Stella seizes the chance to punch Steve right in the face, and the mafia takes him away. Stella is very happy to have avenged her father's death and hugs Charlie to celebrate. Meanwhile, Steve keeps begging the mafia boss, offering to pay double what Charlie did. In the end, Charlie and the crew go on celebrating their victory as they board a train to begin their journey. And the film ends.